I'm sure most of you watching right now are familiar with my blueprint, as that is how we advertise this webinar. And you'll know that we do a pretty good job of promoting all different pathways. It's not always about that big C and that big U. So it'll be interesting to see where people are leaning towards. Predominantly university right now in the lead with about 64%, college at 15%, not sure at 10%, and that's fair. And guys, if you are not sure, and this is me personally speaking, it's okay to not be sure. You're going to figure things out. You're going to learn a lot of different things over the course of your life. You can always learn new things. So it's okay to not be sure. In fact, if you want to be even more okay with not being sure, you can see the banner behind me. That's this podcast that we started at My Blueprint a few months ago, competenciespodcast.com. And we interview industry professionals for them to talk about kind of what they do at work all day and to talk about the 21st century skills they need to be successful there. And these are pretty successful people that we've had on season 1 so far. And you'd be surprised how many of them had no idea what they were going to do after grade 12. But it's about lifelong learning and then applying that learning. For those of you who don't recognize this face or this voice, my name is Damien. I'm with My Blueprint, and I am super excited that I have the opportunity to introduce Suzanne to you today. If you've attended any of these webinars in the past, you also know that I'm not a big fan of those pre-written biographies and introductions. I'm a firm believer in that no one is going to be able to introduce Suzanne better than Suzanne herself. So we've eaten up enough time already. Suzanne, take it from here.
All righty. Thank you, Damien. So the short version of the story is I founded HigherEdPoints, which allows people to use anybody's loyalty points to pay for tuition because I had worked in college publishing on campuses. I worked at Air Miles in the loyalty industry, and then I ran studentawards.com for a while and took all 3 of those career experiences to create a new source of funding for students, because every time I would meet a student or a parent or an educator, they'd say, I can get a little bit of this, but my parents make too much money or my marks aren't high enough. So what other sources of funding are there for me? And so turning loyalty points into tuition seemed like a logical thing to do. But along the way in my decade of working in the space, I would go out to high schools. I love going in person to high schools because the energy in a gymnasium and the educators it's awesome. So I would give a presentation when I was running Student Awards called Scholarships 101, and it was all about finding scholarships. But then everybody asked, what about other sources of funds? Because I'm not an Uber student and I'm not an athlete and my volunteer is just kind of regular. So I compiled all of this information on all the different ways to pay for school. So that's what we'll walk through today. And as Damien mentioned, I've given him the slides. And so you can actually have the PowerPoints themselves, which have live links to all of the resources you'll see on the slides. So don't worry about, it's preferable just to pay attention, and then we'll answer some questions at the end, and then you'll get a copy of the slides if you want them, and it's recorded as well. So here we go. For the students in grade 9, you've got a lot of stuff in the next few years that you're going to be doing. Grade 12, you probably are still facing all of these decisions. So if you're going to go to university, if most of the people have said that, that's great. Have you decided what you want to study and where you want to study that? Are you going to try and go internationally, even if it's distance in the fall? It doesn't matter what decision you make with all of these choices, but everybody has to pay. So for the grade 9 students, you've got lots of time to pull all of this stuff together. Grade 10s, you've still got lots of time. Grade 11 and 12, what you're doing in grade 11 is really important for applying for scholarships in grade 12. So when you get into grade 12, the biggest bulk of awards are available in that grade 12 graduating, going directly into university or college. But the game isn't over at the end of grade 12. And I'll show you all the myths that are out there in a second. I've got 2 kids in university, and in my discussions with them, what I found was with my daughter who's in 4th year now, and with students that I talk to, is tuition is actually the easy thing to budget for because it's posted, you know what it's going to be, it doesn't change, it's in all of the things you're going to look at. Residence is pretty easy to figure out what the cost, and your meal plan as well, because those are posted on your the website and on your offer of admission, et cetera. But everything else really adds up, especially if you're going to live away from home, because you're not right now probably paying for transportation to and from school. Well, you're not going to school right now, probably, depending on where you are in the country. But if you're going to be taking the bus, your school may or may not have a bus pass. So figuring out what that cost will be if you go away from home is important. Telecom, your cell phone and internet costs, is that included with your residence fee? Personal care supplies. So laundry detergent is something that surprised my son when he went. He goes, "Oh yeah, I got to actually have some laundry detergent to do my laundry." So on the left side of this form, it's all the expenses that are the most common expenses. And depending on the program that you take, there may be other expenses. So for nursing students, they have very expensive textbooks. Their courses turn over every 6 weeks, and they have to buy scrubs. And when they're in their upper years, they have to drive to practicums. So there's other course supplies that you might have to have depending on the program that you're in. So on the left-hand side, all your expenses are there, and you can use if you download the PDF or you go to the link, you can actually get an Excel worksheet that you can put your information in if you want to do it by term, by year, for the 4 years or 2 years, whatever you want. And on the right-hand side, this is where you sit down with your parents or guardians and have the conversation with them about what kind of funding they've put aside to help you to pay for school, if they have or if they haven't. So they might have put money into an RESP. And as you get closer to grade 12 and graduating, you'll want your parents to be looking at what's required to get the funds out of the RESP. And you'll want to talk about, if they've got enough money in there to cover more than 1 year, you'll want to talk about whether they take it all out in the first year, whether they spread it over 4 years, et cetera. A lot of students will have been working, so put in your personal savings, what you're going to allocate towards school. And then this is the part that, as a parent, was an eye-opener for me when my daughter was in first year, because we didn't really talk about who was paying for Uber and for Uber Eats. And so there was a big shock when the Uber bills were still on my credit card. It's like, you're gonna use the money to pay for Uber, you're paying for that. So have that conversation with your family so there aren't any surprises when you get there. And there will be surprises along the way. The other thing that happened to my daughter was she borrowed her roommate's car and had a little tiny fender bender, and that was an unexpected expense. So just you don't need to plan for it, have the money set aside, but just know what you're going to do if that stuff happens, who your go-to might be for some help. HigherEdPoints, I'll show you how the site works using loyalty points. Scholarshipscanada.com is the scholarship matching engine that I recommend because it's the most up-to-date from what I've seen and the most comprehensive. They've been around for the longest. And so there's other ones, there's Scholar Tree, and probably in my blueprint, you've got a list of some of the other scholarship places you can go. There's entrance awards, bursaries, government financial aid. We'll talk all about that in the next slides. And what happens when I do this presentation in person, when the parents are there with the students, they're filling this form out as everybody's coming into the presentation. And at the end, there's this look that they give each other, the parent and the student, and they usually have a gap. 96% of the people that come to the Ways to Pay for School presentation will have a gap, and that's normal, it's expected, and it usually takes 7 sources of funds to cobble together to fund a post-secondary education, which is why HigherEdPoints tagline is, it takes a village to raise a mind, not just the village of teachers and other people, but the village to help you pay for it. So let me help you find some cash. There are a bunch of different things that you'll come across as you're looking for funding. There's merit-based awards, and these are the ones, if you're in grade 12, you've probably seen or maybe applied for, maybe you won some of the biggies, the TD Community Leadership Scholarship, the Lauren Award, the Schulich STEM Awards. There's all sorts of merit-based awards, and these are, high achieving students, high marks, huge community service type things. And then you also have merit-based awards when you're applying for your programs at schools. You'll automatically be offered entrance awards at certain schools. It's automatic, it's based on marks sometimes or program, et cetera. And then there are independent scholarships like the Loblaw Scholarship Fund, that is meant for high achieving students as well. Then there's financial need-based awards, and the Canada Student Loan Program, each province has a different name for it. So Ontario's is Ontario Student Assistance Program, BC is BC Student Aid, Manitoba Student Aid. So you'll be able to apply for financial support from the government, and that will come with a grant portion and a loan portion. And I'll talk to you about that in a second on the next slide. Then there are clubs. If anybody belongs to Boys and Girls Clubs, they have scholarships for those programs. Centennial College Pathways to Education, a lot of them have financial need-based, and that generally requires you to prove some sort of financial, to have your parents' tax returns and to prove the financial need. But there's lots of money out there in that category. But the part I love talking about the most is the other category, because that's the one that students that are often going in directly out of high school may not know about. It's one of those things that I wish I had known this when I came in. So that's why I love talking about these in these sorts of seminars. So Scholarships Canada, I've mentioned. HigherEdPoints, I've mentioned. The picture there is Shelley Clayton, who's the Director of Financial Aid at the University of New Brunswick. And she has all sorts of great quotes. And one of them is, you have to actually do some digging because you can't apply for an award that you don't know exists. And I'll tell you how to get yourself set up to find those. One big place that gets overlooked a lot is employers. So I don't know why, but a lot of employers don't do a great job of telling their employees that they have scholarships and bursaries and awards available for their employees' children and for the employees themselves. So Tim Hortons has a great scholarship for their crew, their staff members, but Home Depot had a scholarship and the beer store had a scholarship for children of people. So ask your parents and other relatives. Sometimes it's any relative of the employee that would have them. And then Ryerson University, I always put Ryerson up because if you register when you get onto campus for communication from the financial aid department, that's where the scholarships and the awards and financial aid will come from. What happened with Ryerson was they had so many scholarships that hadn't been awarded, and they are required to give a certain number of these scholarships out every year, that anybody who gave them their email address and communicated with them, they asked them, what do you need help paying for? And what the students said, because it's Toronto, is I need help with transportation because the TTC is too expensive. I'm actually just paying for my trips every day. And I think they ended up giving out to everybody who put their hand up a TTC pass. So they had a Metro pass for the month. So it really pays to pay attention to those communications and to get signed up for them. So HigherEdPoints, you can use your parents, your grandparents, your next door neighbor, the person whose dog you dog sit all the time to pay for your tuition. And the way that it works, it's simple. Whomever you want to tap on the shoulder, if they have Aeroplan, TD, CIBC Aventura, Annex, or Scotia Rewards points, they can redeem them for HigherEdPoints education credit. And when you register for an account at HigherEdPoints, you put in the information about that certificate that you've redeemed for, the credit, and then the student information, and HigherEdPoints deposits the fund directly into your school account at your university, your college, the Canada Student Loan Program as well. So keep this in mind. If you do end up getting federal student loans or provincial student loans, you can use the program to pay those back too. And our oldest loan repayer is 50 years old. So it could take you a while to repay those loans. So if you're looking for the government student aid, I just send people to canada.ca because that's where every province's information is listed on their loan program and the application process. We had some people from Alberta. The Alberta government actually gives out a whack of scholarships directly themselves, more than any other province that I know of. So going to canada.ca and clicking over to Alberta, you'll also get sent over to, you can probably go to the Alberta Student Aid website, but there may be a link in Alberta to those awards. And they just revamped the program. I haven't had time to check it out. And this year, you probably saw that for students that were enrolled, they had the student grant that was available. The link I put on the bottom actually has up-to-date information on the COVID supports. So what happened with the federal and the provincial loan programs was there was a hiatus on repaying. Students didn't have to repay, but they also increased the amount of grant that was available with the loans. So when you apply, you'll go in and you'll put your parents' income level in, and it will give you an estimate of the amount of money that you'll get to help you study. And a part of that, the grant portion, you can take the grant, which is free. It doesn't have to be repaid, and you do not have to take the loan portion. One of the students, we had an intern, and what she did was she took the loan portion, which put it in a separate bank account. And if she needed it, it was there. And as soon as she was working enough to repay what was in that loan account, she'd put it back in. So it was a great backstop for her. And when she comes out, she aims to have all of the loan money still in an account, earning a little bit of interest, and then she can repay that loan right away. So just take your time, and the loan application process, the educators can probably add in the chat here in your province when they open up. In Ontario last year, it was a little bit late because of the changes they were making, but it's generally in the spring. And then the funds that you get will be, in a lot of cases, deposited into your tuition account at your school. But that's a whole study in and of itself. So give yourself some time to investigate that. The other thing that a BC educator told me once was, make sure, even though you may not have any income, get your taxes done in the spring, because it'll speed up the process for you to get other sorts of government funding that's out there. Sometimes they require your student tax returns and definitely your parents' tax returns to allocate them. So that's a little tip, a checklist that was given to me by an educator. So if you're not feeling like you are up for applying for scholarships, I just want to say that everything that you do and the time that you spend sort of crafting your own personal story and reflecting on the things that you've done over the course of your high school journey and even your life, it will come in handy in so many different ways beyond just applying for scholarships. And I think, Damien, you probably talk a lot about this, and I know that you've got a place that you can put in my blueprint some of the information on your past experiences. But I'll show you one of the big scholarships out there. The reality is, if you keep your mind open to looking for scholarships once a month, there's no scholarship season. There will always be new money that gets entered. Damien and I were talking about the Scotia Award. That's like off season. It came out just recently. So don't think that if you've missed the boat in grade 12 that you've missed the boat forever, because there is lots of money out there all the time. You don't always have to have high marks or financial need. There was a scholarship that's called the Opteris Award, and I usually have it in this slide, but I put some different things in because Opteris isn't open right now. But it's meant for women age 16 to 28, and the founder, if you're on Scholarships Canada, you'll see it next year, but the founder wants to reward people who are rule breakers. And so, people that don't follow the rules, that want to take a different path. And the funding it's two $10,000 awards, the funding that's available is also open to international students. So that's a really great one. And that one, is one that you might not come across if you're not regularly looking on Scholarships Canada or ScholarTree or one of the other sites. There are also awards available at every stage of your academic career. So entrance awards in course means when you're in your program at university or college. There's automatic consideration ones, and then there's lots of awards for grad school and other types of funding if you're doing master's programs and PhD programs. So the bottom line is that there are awards for every type of student out there. Doesn't mean you have to apply for everything, but just taking a look and applying to some of them means you have a chance to secure some free money that doesn't have to be paid back. So Shelley Clayton's here again on my campus financial aid offices slide, because at UNB and at many universities and colleges, they now have something called a One app. And it means once a year you can apply for any awards that come up from your campus's financial aid department. And there was a student who was at UNB. He's the son of my neighbor. He got 4 or 5 different $500 awards, just landed in his tuition account. And he just made sure he applied for the One app. It was just, you meet the criteria, we've got this money, and it's going to come out. So make sure you check to see if your campus has the One app. The Khan Academy Breakthrough Junior Challenge. So for you students that are in grade 9, a Canadian one this year. I'm not sure if you saw this, Damien, in the Globe and Mail, but if you click on the links when you get this, Miriam Desagai, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. She's from Northern Alberta, and she won a $400,000 prize for, it was quantum physics. Did you see that one, Damien?
Yeah, I knew it was engineering related and STEM related, but it was so cool to see. Yeah.
It was amazing. And so today, when I was going to find the link to this story, I watched when they announced it at the school. It was so awesome. And I actually understood what I watched after watching it 4 times. Anyway, so it's open to 13 to 18-year-olds worldwide. And the judging rubric is really cool because it includes peer review. So anybody who, I forget if you have to, when you apply, you actually are required to judge other students' work. So it's very cool. And it's open from April to June. So when you have a bit of time in the spring, take a look at it and consider applying for that, because you don't have to apply for anything else if you win a $400,000 award. And your teacher also, so the educators out there, the teacher gets a $50,000 part of that package. The Alt Scholarship is something that we created at HigherEdPoints to include more students. So you'll find when you're looking through all the scholarships that it will seem sometimes like you can't apply for anything because the criteria can be kind of narrow sometimes. So the Alt Scholarship is the answer to that. So it allows first, people that are in undergrad now, allows part-time students. If any of the educators are out there taking master's courses, you can apply for the alt scholarship as well. And all you have to do is, here's the link to that. You just register for it, put in your picture or a picture you're comfortable sharing, and your story. Tell people what you want to study, where you want to study, what your goals are. And it's a crowdfunding campaign. And so you can actually collect cash, or you can collect donations of loyalty points from people. And there's the how to participate information. And at the bottom of the slide, Rai is a student in BC. She's from Indonesia. And she was saying, I have such a hard time finding scholarships I can apply for. So she signed up for the alt scholarship. Her story is amazing. You can look at the link. And she, through sharing it in social media, and HigherEdPoints sent it out as well, has exceeded her $2,000 goal, which is going to let her take some additional courses. So it takes a little bit of work, but she didn't have to put in a transcript, and she really didn't have to write an essay. She did write a little bit of the story. So my advice when you are looking at scholarships, register at all those sites. And then when you get in there, like, take a quiet weekend afternoon when the weather isn't great and create a master list of all the awards and scholarships that interest you. Don't worry yet about whether the eligibility criteria is matches what you can do, or what stage you're at, but just create a master list. And in Scholarships Canada, there's a feature where you can save the awards that you're interested in. And then the big thing is to calendarize the deadlines that for each scholarship that you think you want to apply for. Put it in, 2 weeks before the deadline or a month before the deadline, because before you know it, if you need a reference letter, there might not be enough time for the person you want to write that letter for you to get that in. So put in the deadline, and then prioritize the awards that you find based on what interests you the most. It's going to be a lot easier for you to write an essay about a sport that you play, or a language that you speak, or quantum physics than it is to, talk about how you're going to change the world if you don't know what you want to study yet. So prioritize those awards in sequence of what's really interesting to you, because I read literally hundreds of scholarship applications, and I can tell when somebody really is passionate about the topic and what they're writing about. It's like the person sitting across from me when they're really engaged. There are little Easter eggs and secrets and tips and tricks that you'll find in every single award. So take a couple of minutes and write the criteria and the terms and conditions. So in the terms and conditions of any of the big awards, they'll tell you what they're looking for. And they'll often give you the judging rubric. So 20% may be on volunteerism, 30% may be marks, financial need may be a consideration. And so you can actually tailor your application based on what's most important to the people while they're watching it. And I can tell you also, having read a bunch of them, when students are speaking to the criteria of the award, it's a lot easier to connect the dot with this student knows what they want, and we'd love to help and give that student some money. And I mentioned the deadlines again, because a family member put the deadline down, and it turned out it was the date they were making the decision, not the date everything was due. So she got everything ready and submitted it on the date that they announced the winners. That's a hard lesson to learn. And then, as I mentioned earlier, just revisit all the sites that you set up regularly, because there's always new stuff coming up. And if you can, sign up for alerts on those sites. The one award that I always say, take a look at the TD scholarships for community leadership, because what they've done with this application is, if you take the time, it's a giant amount of work to apply for the big awards. But the reason I choose the TD scholarship is the essay that you have to write is only 600 words. It's not that long. And it's talking about community leadership. And they ask you these questions can apply to why you play the instrument that you play, why you chose the sport that you chose, why you want to study what you want to study. They want to know why you got involved, how your involvement shows initiative and innovation, how your efforts have strengthened others, and then the length of time that you've been involved. So students in grade 9 and grade 10, start doing stuff that you like doing now, because the length of your involvement in your volunteerism, in this case, in this scholarship, is as important as what you do. They want to see long-term commitment to it. It's not just, you're not just doing it for the sake of winning a scholarship. And then how your community has affected you. So those questions may be different in other awards, but if you take the time to think through this and then write something, have somebody read what you've written, make sure that what you're trying to express is coming across on paper, that's going to help you for any other award that you want to apply for, because you've gone through the the thinking on all of this important stuff. And you can, mix and match and cut and paste and edit for any other award out there. This one also asks you for a letter of recommendation and 2 letters of support from community groups and your transcript. So that takes a bit of time for you to pull that stuff together. And the one thing I'd say about letter of recommendations, if you're volunteering now and you're working, ask the volunteer leader or the employer for a letter of recommendation when you're done working there or when you've completed your volunteerism, and then put it in your portal so you've got it for later. Because a lot of students forget. In grade 9, I went back to my public school and I volunteered and I ran the whatever event. And some scholarships are just looking for a check mark for community service. This one's looking for a huge commitment. But there was a case with a scholarship where the student was a finalist, but because they hadn't put down any community service, they were disqualified. And the student reached out and said, okay, well, I did volunteer for my brother's hockey team. Does that count? So it does count. That kind of stuff's important. So the other way to help you earn some money is to work while you're at school. Sometimes it's challenging. The research shows that 15 hours of work a week actually makes students more efficient with their studies. And it's tough now with the pandemic. It is hard to find employers and jobs, especially if you're students and restaurants and retail are not open, but there are opportunities out there. So if you haven't yet, and maybe grade 9 is a little too early, but definitely grade 11 and 12, if you haven't set yourself up with a LinkedIn profile yet, I highly recommend it. And I highly recommend that you keep it up to date throughout your educational career, because there's nothing campus recruiters like more and employers at companies like more than seeing students that are interested in their field. So you can just create your profile, get somebody, your guidance counselor, somebody to help you set up your profile. LinkedIn is not a social network, it's a professional network. So you can put your volunteer experience, say, I really want to go and study this at university or college. And then when you're in there, you can politely request to connect with people on LinkedIn. And if you connect with them, what will happen is you'll start to get things that they're posting and you'll see what's happening in their industry. So you can learn more about their industry. And then there are hundreds and hundreds of campus recruiters, and there's hundreds and hundreds of employers that are specifically campus recruiters. And on the right-hand side, you'll see Anastasia is the internship program manager at Tesla. And she actually put in her profile, here are tips on how to get your resume in front of me. And she actually recently posted something else. So you can actually link in with her. She'll definitely accept any students, from what I was reading. And that's a great person to see what's happening in the industry. And Tesla just made an investment in Bitcoin. So anyway, it's kind of a cool company to be connected with. And you can also do lots of research on industries and jobs and who's hiring. Behind Anastasia, I pulled this off yesterday as I was updating this deck. And every so often, LinkedIn will post who's hiring. So for the educators as well, there's lots of jobs that are listed, and they're student jobs. If you've got students that are looking for some part-time work, having Google on your application for biz school would look really great if there's a student position or an internship. The other group, I'm not sure, Damien, if you guys work with Ripen, but they've just launched something called Level Up. And these projects are available for students while they're in school. So grade 12s, you can actually, I think it runs through the fall. You can sign up for programs at Ripen Level Up, the link's there, and they've got $1,400 that you get paid for working on a project. So all the details are at that link. And Elof Careers, if you follow the founders, find Elof Careers on LinkedIn. If you follow Liz or Chandra, the 2 founders, they have tons of great advice on the virtual interview, the committee interview, how to spiff up your resume, how to network during a pandemic. So that's a great resource as well. And then other resources, some of you might have attended Janet McDonald's, How to Find Scholarships. I always recommend Janet because she does a deep dive, and you can follow her on LinkedIn as well and the other social sites. And she puts all sorts of new scholarship information up all the time. So she's a great person to follow. The Canadian Gap Year Association is a great one-stop for all gap year options. And you might want to consider doing that, because if students aren't in class in the fall, both of my kids have said it's a really different experience, not studying face-to-face. So even one term of doing something different and deferring your start to the winter or to the next fall is a possibility. Discovery Year, both Can Gap Year and Discovery Year are participating institutions at HigherEdPoints. So you can fund the programs they offer with your parents' loyalty points as well. And Discovery Year is a full year term, but I'm not sure. You had Jay on, I think, the site, Damien.
We had him on the podcast, and I just dropped the link in the chat. He's actually doing our next value add webinar in March about all the skills that you need to succeed after high school. So it's a great one to check out.
Yeah, and it's great. If you're not sure what you want to do, the beautiful thing is people go into first year at any stage and any age. So you don't have to start right away. Don't feel the pressure. Do take a little bit of time to figure out what you want to do, because from a funding standpoint, having a false start and spending a couple of years studying something you really decide you don't like, it's probably better to explore that before you go in. Anyway, that's different than when I was around, because you kind of went and you had to stick in the program you were in, but there's tons of options. And don't let it stress you out. You can always change your mind. And then on the West Coast, Murray Baker is a fellow who's written The Debt-Free Graduate. He's got a great book, and a lot of high schools actually, probably in BC, will have this resource, at least in your library, if not given out to the students. And that is all of my information. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
We definitely have questions. So Suzanne, before we get into the questions, thank you very much. We've talked before, and I even learned a lot today. So I'm excited for what everybody watching is going to do with this new information and how they're going to apply it. So I'm going to open up Q&A and let's see what we got here. All right, let's start with Pamela. For provincial loan support, do you apply to the province you live in or where you will be attending if it's out of province?
Great question.
You know what I mean?
You apply in the province of your residence. So you apply if you're in Alberta. Let me start with Ontario. If you're in Ontario, you'll have one application to OSAP, and there are two components to your loan. There's a federal portion to your loan and a provincial portion to your loan. Most provinces are integrated, so you get one application. In Alberta, pardon me, you have to apply to Alberta Student Aid for the provincial portion, and you apply to Canada Student Loans. But if you go to canada.ca, all of that information is in your province, and it'll walk you through the process. One other thing, you can use the funds in your province to study not only in other provinces, but also in approved institutions internationally.
Okay. I actually have a question in my Q&A that I was just thinking the other day. So what if I receive a scholarship and my tuition's already been paid for? What happens to the excess money? As a student, can I decide where it goes, or does that ever happen?
Yeah, and it's an awesome thing because it usually goes into your pocket, but it may not be a direct route into your pocket. So in the terms and conditions of the scholarship that you're applying for, it'll usually say where the funds are paid. Sometimes it's paid directly to the student. Sometimes they want the funds to go directly into a tuition account at a school. So look at the terms and conditions. Most universities and colleges, if there's an overpayment on a tuition account, will give the student a refund. Some may apply it to meal plans or residence fees, or they may put it on the next term's tuition. So that, again, when you're talking to your fees office, they'll let you know.
Okay, awesome. Next question. This one's for me, from Pamela. School Finder versus My Blueprint searching. Please comment. Answer is both, guys. One of the things we love to talk about My Blueprint is that it is a bit of a one-stop shop. But we always encourage students to go above and beyond, especially when they're making big decisions like this. That's why we link to the program website. That's why we link to the school website when you're researching those programs. And to Suzanne's point, you should be ending up on the institution website anyways when you kind of narrow down that search. So use My Blueprint, use School Finder, go to the website, do everything, right? These are big decisions. Okay, we've got a couple of questions about HigherEdPoints. I think you're a good person to answer those, Suzanne. Are the institutions on HigherEdPoints limited, right? Like, which ones are available? I guess best answer is go to the website and you'll see them listed, but how would you answer that?
Yeah, so our mission is to help any student or parent fund their education. So if we have to send a school an envelope full of toonies, we'll do it on behalf of the student. But the short answer is if you go to higheredpoints.com to the participating institutions page, you'll see a bunch of logos on the page. And at the bottom, there's a list of other institutions that we can also send funds to. But if your school isn't on board, what we'll do is we'll reach out initially to the school and see if we can get them on board. And if we can't, we'll figure out how to get the funds to them on your behalf.
Great answer. Yeah. When are the grants open for registration, and when is it the form for it due for Ontario? I'm not sure I understand that question. Suzanne, do you?
I think it's when do you apply for your student loans? And there's no set date. If you go to canada.ca and hit Ontario and OSAP, I didn't get a chance to look today to see if the dates were up, but it was May or June last year because they had to change the system because of the increase of grants, but it'll be in the spring. And the schools give the students that are receiving government grants they give them 3 weeks longer in September for the most part to pay their tuition because the funding is coming from OSAP or the student loan program. And the one thing I forgot to mention, if you can apply for student loans, if your parents' income isn't too high for you to be approved, my recommendation, and this was another tip I got from a financial aid officer, apply. You don't have to take the money, but the fact that you actually are eligible and are listed as someone to receive it, schools have in Ontario an access grant. And so if they have a certain amount that they think your tuition is going to cost, if say you're taking a really expensive engineering program and you only got this much money from OSAP, you might actually be topped up and get more grant money because they want to provide equal access to every student. And campus work study programs, if you're going to work on campus, will give, because there's limited supply of those jobs, the people that have government financial assistance are often first in line for those campus jobs. And those are the plum ones, like working at the sports center or the welcome desk or researching for profs.
It's an amazing tip to bring back, so thank you for that. I had a question about One App. Where would you be able to find out if your institution has a One App? Also, can you just talk a bit more about what the One App actually entails?
So I just use the term One App because that's the most common way to refer to it. But the place, your best friend on campus, and the reason I put Shelley Clayton from UNB in there, is your financial aid officer is your best friend or will be your best friend. And I highly recommend that students and parents go on to the campus financial aid website as soon as you look at a school. So for example, if you want to go to Carleton or UBC, on the website, there's a financial aid office website that will tell you all the scholarships that are available on campus. It will tell you how on that site, the schools actually administer the government student loan programs. So when you apply, you're gonna have the financial aid officer on your campus is your go-to person to answer questions about that. So if you find you didn't get as much money as you thought you would and you want to appeal the decision from the loan program, your financial aid officer can help you with that. So on that site, you'll actually see information on register here to be automatically considered for awards throughout the year on the campuses that have it. So every school I've asked in the last year now has them, except for one of the colleges in Ontario. I can't remember which one, but I was in Ottawa presenting the Ways to Pay, and Algonquin, Carleton, U of O each had one application at the beginning of the year.
Sounds like a fantastic idea. It's a combo question, something on YouTube, and we also received essentially the same question in the chat here, Q&A. Does HigherEdPoints expect new loyalty companies to be added? There's people asking about PC MasterCard points.
So PC Optimum,
Okay.
So here's the short answer is I've spoken to every single loyalty program out there to try to get them on board, and I think it's a no-brainer. The challenge with PC is you can only redeem those points in store. So when you go into Shoppers or you go into Loblaws, they don't have a catalog of rewards. So even though the person that runs the program thinks it's a great idea and would love to help students, we can't get added to their loyalty catalog. But what you can do is get one of the TD reward cards or have your family use the TD reward or Aeroplan card. You swipe your Optimum and then use your credit card from one of the programs that we do participate. And believe you me, I'm trying my hardest to get them all on board. Send a message into the customer service center of your favorite loyalty program.
That's what I was just going to say. I bet if everyone watching this webinar got on Twitter and in a polite and respectful way asked PC and Optimum and all the different loyalty programs, maybe they don't know about higher ed, right? So HigherEdPoints, I definitely let them know because there are power and strength in numbers. Yeah, we've got a question about international. So if I'm planning to attend a US school, do you know if there are any limitations to accessing Canadian funds?
So you'll be able to find that out depends on which province you're in, but there will be a list of like government approved international institutions. And you can also find out that information from the international recruitment department at that school. So they'll have their own, and the recruitment at the international schools, they love international students. They'll help you navigate the funding available at the school, and they will also have to administer the receipt of the funds from the government student loan program. So there's a list, an approved list on the canada.ca website.
Awesome. Okay, got a couple of specific ones. Feel free to say, this will be specific to the institution or the scholarship, so just do your due diligence. But got one, do student loans cap per semester or per year? Is there a limit to how much money you can receive?
Yeah, so you'll get that assessment when you go in and do your application. They'll tell you how much money that you're going to get each year, and they'll tell you the grant portion and the loan portion.
Yeah. What marks are considered high marks in scholarship perspective? That's got to be scholarship specific, no?
It is, and the TD award is 75% because they don't really care about marks. They recognize that if somebody's out changing the world, they may not be spending as much time studying, and it's not one of the criteria. So that'll be in the terms and conditions in the awards.
It's one of my favorite tips is to go through the T's and C's because you might find little nuggets in there. They may not be the most interesting thing to read, but you can put some extra money in your pocket or at least give you a leg up during that application process. This one I think I know the answer to. Can you get more than one scholarship combined? Can you combine grant and scholarship? I think you can, right? You can win all the scholarships you possibly can, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I think those are the big ones. Suzanne, you hit them out of the park. So guys, some great questions. So Suzanne, I'm going to wrap it up here. We've run through the questions. Suzanne, why don't you close this out? Give us some takeaways in terms of where I can go as a student or an educator to learn a bit more about HigherEdPoints, about the alt scholarship, and more information about ways to pay for school.
Okay, so if you go to higheredpoints.com, at the top, you'll see the little badges we have. One is the alt scholarship, so you can get to the alt scholarship from there. You can also go to waystoPayForSchool.com, and we haven't put all of our content up there yet. We're trying to get more of the content up there. But at HigherEdPoints, you'll have all the information about how to pay using loyalty points, and there's an email you can send to friends and relatives saying help for my education that won't cost you a cent. And nobody's flying anywhere right now, so use those points for education.
I think now is a great time to be encouraging your family, friends, relatives to donate some of those points towards your post-secondary education.
So somebody asked about Air Miles. They're one of the ones that you can send a request to come on board because I worked at Air Miles and I've been trying for 7 years to get them to come on board. And it's going to take, I think, social pressure.
I'm excited to see what this group can do. When you get a motivated group of students, real change can actually happen. So guys, let's get a few more loyalty programs partnered up with HigherEdPoints. And I'm going to leave it there. Suzanne, Tyson, thank you so much for taking the time today to share this information with students and for educators. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and thanks for everything that you're doing.
Thanks so much, Damien. And thanks everybody for coming out. Good luck and get in touch.